This is the 10-Minute Teacher Podcast, episode 686, Courageous Conversations. Dr. Andrea Dozier and Vicki Davis talk about race relations. Welcome to the 10-Minute Teacher Podcast, hosted by author, educator, speaker, and mom, the Cool Cat teacher, Vicki Davis. The resurgence of the topic of racism has led to discussions about organizational reform, including school reform. But what about personal reform? Well, you're about to hear a very important discussion. Vicki's guest today, Dr. Andrea Dozier, like so many others, has been a target of racial ignorance. But you won't hear angry words today. Instead, you'll hear a life-affirming, unifying message of hope in dealing with our own misunderstandings about people who outwardly seem different than us. Dr. Andrea Dozier has been providing instruction in higher education for over 18 years. Currently, she is an assistant professor of nursing and undergraduate pre-licensure clinical coordinator at Albany State University. She is a member of Sigma Theta Tau International Honor Society for Nursing, a Faculty Internationalization Fellow, and published author. Well, let's get to the discussion. Enjoy!
Today's guest, Dr. Andrea Dozier, is certified in online instruction and is a hybrid nursing program instructor who focuses on teacher efficacy, instructional methodologies, and course design in nursing education. But most of all, she's my friend. So while we could discuss online learning and such, we're going to talk about something much more important. She is a mom of 3 boys, and while I see her as my friend, she's also an African American. She and I have had some conversations about race relations, and we think it's important to bring these conversations to the forefront. So, Andrea, as you and I have talked, I just hope that we can pull some of what we've talked about behind the scenes into the forefront to have these conversations. I mean, what are your thoughts about why we need to be talking about different perspectives in racial relations?
First of all, I want to say thank you, Vicki, for having me on this show. I think this is a very important topic that needs to be addressed. Oftentimes, people who are different tend to avoid difficult topics, but we learn from each other. This is especially important in education because it is my belief that education has no color. I was joking with one of my boys earlier today, and I said, it's not like you have a Caucasian science book and an Asian science book or a Hispanic science book or an African American science book. When you're the instructor of science, you have a science book or you have science materials. So I think when we talk about the educational system, we don't necessarily need to look at the colors of our kids' skin, because up under all of that, people are still people and the education still needs to take place.
No, you say something. I've heard you say it more than once about, our circle. Why don't you share that?
Yeah, I don't know where I got this from, but I heard someone say a long time ago that when talking about your circle, if your circle looks just like you, if everyone in your circle looks like you need a new circle.
Yep.
It is important that we have diversity within our personal circles. And that is how we learn from each other. I'm 46, right? I'm African American, and I've lived in Georgia all of my life. I've traveled to different places, but I already know how to be a 46-year-old African American educator in Georgia because I've done that all of my life. What I don't know how to do is, let's say I'm not Caucasian, I'm not Asian. So I need to come outside of my comfort zone and begin to collaborate with those that are different from me. Because that's how you learn. You learn about the culture, you learn about the individuals, and that's how we grow. I think a lot of times as educators, we get stuck in I'm supposed to teach this subject. And we think we're making progress when we learn a new innovation, and we are making progress. But then what? Then what do we do? At the end of the day, are you going to be remembered for what you did or how you treated people? How diverse are you? If you're the smartest one in your circle, get a new circle. Surround yourself with people who are different, people who are smarter than you, people who are going to empower you, people who are going to make you a better person, or people who bring something different to the table. And I think that's really important just in life, but especially in education.
But, it's such a hard time. For me, I always just try to prefer to live my life in a way that shows that I love people of all kinds and to try to have that diverse circle of kids, of adults. But there is a time that we need to speak out and say that we stand against racism. We just do. But, you've raised 3 boys in the South, and you and I both live in the South, and we know that racism is in the South. And when we know it, we know it's everywhere. All we can do is about ourselves. But do you think sometimes, I think you have some experience maybe where people don't realize what they're doing? Help folks understand. I would love for you to share some of the stories you've shared with me, because sometimes you think people don't realize what they're saying and how it's coming across, because you're a professional. You're a highly educated professional.
So sometimes people who are different automatically make assumptions. If you see me, I'm a divorced mom of 3 teenage boys. I have a 19-year-old, a 15-year-old, and a 13-year-old. So if you were to see us out in the store or even at the school, I think sometimes people just automatically make assumptions. Well, perhaps they receive, government assistance, there's nothing wrong with that. Or perhaps they are substandard. And I've worked over the years to try and educate or help people to understand that we should not automatically assume things about people who are different. Just because a kid does not do their homework that you assign on Google Classroom does not mean that we cannot afford internet. It could mean that we are in a rural area and the internet connection is not good. Or, just because we are from a single parent home does not mean we get reduced lunch or what have you. And all of those things are good, but we just should not make assumptions. Yeah, we've had a lot of examples of that. Just because the kid doesn't have school supplies in school does not mean that we don't have the school supplies. I don't think people realize what they do. And you are right in that sometimes people don't know what to say, but it's okay for you to say that you don't know what to say. Does that make sense?
It does. But now, those of us who teach in a diverse environment, which celebrate their diverse environments, that's awesome. But whatever environment you teach in, what do we say? Like, for example, your teachers of your children, how do you hope they're going to respond in the fall? How are they going to help the classroom be more equitable? What do you wish they would say to your boys or not say to your boys?
I don't want them to focus on the fact that they are African-American boys in their classroom. I want them to focus on the fact that they are boys in their classroom. I think we focus a lot on what makes us different, but if we would focus more on what we have in common, I think that would help educators. And let's say we go back to the children are able to go back to school. Well, if the teacher doesn't know, it's okay for him or her to ask. That's how you find out. I'm not opposed to that. If they don't know, they just don't know,
I heard an African-American or read an African-American say on Twitter the other day, before you ask me to do something for you, ask how I am.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, we're all just humans, aren't we?
Right. We all have a little bit of dysfunction in our family. We may not admit it, but nobody's like the perfect family. This is a new normal for us. And we have to realize that life is hard. And my kid may have a bad day. He may have left his homework over his dad's house or over his grandma's house or whatever. That could happen to anybody. So it's not to be assumed that just because a person looks this way or their hair is this way or they dress a certain way or they talk a certain way, we should not make judgments about them or try and group them all together. Does that make sense?
It does. I'm glad that in my circle of friends, I struggle with how do we help our world become a place where people can love each other. I just think that oversimplify. Why can't we all get along?
Mm-hmm.
Why?
Yeah.
But we have to learn from history. We have to understand that history is there, but we have to also understand that the history of now. We're writing right now. The people in 10 years are going to look back and say, those people in 2020 saw the mistakes of the past and they said they will not be the mistakes of our future.
Right.
Or those people just sat around and whined and didn't get together and be united. I saw the other day somebody was talking about an algorithm somebody had written that would go through and find the supporters of the president on their Facebook page so they could unfollow them all, whether they had publicly said they did it or not. And then I saw somebody else say that they were looking for an algorithm that would show everybody who didn't. Okay, come on. I mean, are we the United States of America? Are we the divided States of America? But if you're not united, how can you stay whole? And I just worry.
One of the things that I wrote down for me when thinking about relationships with people, we are so much more than our differences. I think that we have forgotten how to disagree and not be offensive. Just because I don't agree with you as a person or as an educator, we don't have to not be friends anymore. I think we need to choose which battles we are going to engage in, and we have to purposefully decide that we are going to make a difference. And how do we start to make a difference? You see each person as a person of value. I believe that each person has potential inside of them. There is greatness inside of everyone. The issue is the person does not necessarily believe it, and then those around them don't do such a good job of pulling it out of them. And I think that as a mom, as an educator, as a teacher, I'm kind of passionate about helping other people realize their greatness inside of them and helping them to achieve that.
You know, I think even when, like, for example, a child may go home and say that I said something, and sometimes they may take it out of context. There are parents that have called me up and said, my child said you said this. What was the deal? Like, right. Surely they took it out of context, right? Because I've been teaching 18 years, so I've had lots of both sides of this. Mm-hmm. And then I've had parents who immediately emailed my principal and said, how dare you have this person on staff? They said blank. And a lot of times, you know, you see people judging people's hearts, I guess, or not giving people the benefit of the doubt. It's like, you know, we have so many ways to divide. You know, I'm a mask wearer. I'm not. I'm a Republican. I'm a Democrat. You know, I support the police. I support the protesters. I support both. I support whatever. Like, everybody's trying to draw lines. You know, I saw a sign, and I think it was from Seattle, and it said, no bad protesters and no good police. I'm not going to get into all of the pieces, but anytime you cast something so in stone that you say that if you are this, you are bad, that to me is a problem. Like, what do we do about this kind of thinking where if you don't agree with me, I don't want anything to do with you? Like you said, can't we learn to get along? Can't we coexist? Can't we learn to respectfully disagree? Or does it have to be this way?
I think we have to learn how to go back to what we were taught, or hopefully we were taught when we were younger. Be considerate. Realize that people are individuals, and you will have a different train of thought than I do. And that's okay. What do we agree on? Okay. What do we have in common? I'll tell you, from a nursing standpoint, the biggest organ in the body is the integumentary system, or the skin, right? But up under the skin, guess what? Your blood is the same color as mine. Your organs are the same as mine. We spend too much energy and time in just finding ways to make life harder. We increase the divide that is present. And I think a lot of factors cause that. But if we would stop giving so much attention to the divide and focus on commonality, we would be better off. And it starts one person at a time. For example, I was a part of this social media group on Facebook. I didn't really understand what the group was about, but I thought, okay, somebody I knew invited me to it. And I had been a member for a few months, but today they posted something that just really disturbed me. And I thought, okay, here's what I'm going to do about this. I am going to leave this group, because just reading what the group was posting was causing me to feel some type of way. And I didn't need to have that inside of me. I chose to leave that group and just deprogram myself from what I had seen. Because if I were to internalize what I had seen, that would have affected me negatively as a person. And I don't have space inside of me for all of that negativity. I got a lot of things I need to be doing. And so, I think that we have different generations handle different situations differently. And I have seen a generation that has a lot of energy, and they are very, very passionate about what they believe in. And I say to myself, what can I do to channel some of that energy in a more productive way? Because we don't want to keep going around and around in circles. Racism has existed way back in the biblical days, but when are we going to move past it?
That's a great question, but just as a mom, after a lot of these things have happened, is you and I both go to the same church, and in my Sunday school class, it's a very diverse group, and we're of all types of races, and we just wept for our children. And Andrea, I can't imagine how you might feel that you have to tell your sons something different than I may have to tell my sons because my sons are white and your sons are black. That is so disturbing to me. Right. That is so disturbing. Why should your children fear for their lives because of their skin color?
Unfortunately, that's the world that we live in. But we have this little practice in my house. Before my kids would leave to go to school, we would pray together and we'd have a group hug. And I have teenage boys and they don't like to hug, but I have a little song I sing to them and we hug. And so I try to do that each time we leave. And at night, we gather together and we pray and we eat dinner together, or at least one meal a day together. And we talk about things. And I tell them, don't leave this house upset with me or your brother, because, it may be the last time that you see me. And so if it's the last time that you see me for whatever reason, do you want to leave me angry? My 19-year-old drives, right? Scariest thing in the world to be a mom of an African-American teenager. Being a mom of a teenager that drives is scary enough. And, my fear was that he'd always get pulled over by the police, and we'd talk about what to say, what not to say, what to do, what not to do. And that is a scary thing to have to do. It's just one of those things you have to do. It used to be when I was in school, we could leave the home, get on the bus, go to school and come back. We never gave a second thought to were we going to make it back home. We just did. But now you can leave your house, your kid can leave home and go to school, and a horrible accident can happen at school, and they never make it back. And so I have to have the talk about what it's like to be Black in America, but you have to have the talk about safety in schools. For African American parents, it's double. We got to have what do you do if somebody comes to your school and tries to harm you at school, but then what happens if somebody mistreats you because you're Black?
A lot of people are having the conversation about what do you do if somebody jumps you at school. Right. I had a boy many years ago transfer to the school I was at last, and he's like, Miss Davis, you know what I like most about this school? And I was like, well, what? He said, I like the corners. I'm like, the corners? What are you talking about? He says, well, I was and I'm just going to say it like it is. He said, I was the biggest white boy in the school, and people could move up the food chain by beating me up. And I couldn't walk around a corner and feel safe. So I like the corners. And I'm like,
yeah.
That, and that's just a straight school violence. You could say whatever. But our world, this has just got to change. Somehow, and we've had the conversations with our children about, you should have friends of all types. We don't stereotype. Yes, you've grown up in the South. And yes, you've heard people say these things. We don't agree with these things. These are not acceptable. This is not who we believe you should be. And, fortunately, my kids have friends of all types. And I rejoice in that. But my heart is broken. And even now, Andrea, airing this episode scares me to death. It scares me to death because I have probably said something wrong. And I have probably said something that's going to offend somebody. And I may be one of the 50,000 people that has to get up and apologize for something I have said. And I think that's part of it, Andrea, that I struggle with is I've seen people well-intentioned say things.
Right.
And it was totally either the wrong thing to say or it was taken wrong, but their heart was in the right place. It makes you not want to say anything, but you can't say nothing.
Right. And so you're in a hard spot because if you say something, it may be the wrong thing, but if you don't say something, people are going to be angry. The reality is you're not going to be able to please everyone. If your heart is in the right place, at some point, people have to learn how to look past all of that and just say, well, what is the person's heart like? How can I help that person? I have a lot of Caucasian friends, and sometimes they say things that are just not quite right. And so I'll just tell them, hey, let's go back to that. And so you probably don't want to say that because it is viewed as such and such, or whatever. And they do me the same way. Or one of my close friends will say, I don't have all the answers, but can you help me to understand? And, I think conversations like that are needed. People don't want to have them, though. It's much easier for me to be over here and angry because you said, Vicki, for example, said the wrong thing and she should know it, blah, blah, blah. But if you're not African American, so I should not expect you to understand my point of view. I should expect you to respect me as an individual and to treat me like you want to be treated. Okay. But you didn't go through my experiences as a Black person. And so that's unfair for me to try and expect you to understand that. You haven't walked in my shoes. I haven't walked in your shoes. So I don't understand what it's like for you to be a Caucasian woman in the South. I think we need to be realistic. And when we don't know, we need to say, I don't know. Can you help me to understand? And then we have to do what it takes to try to help the other person understand. Somebody has to put forth an effort. Somebody has to decide to say, hey, you know what? We got to promote more love. We got to promote more unity. I'm going to make a purposeful decision not to be a divider, but I'm going to try and be a peacemaker because it's easier on me physically. Here's my nurse coming out of me. It's physiologically, it is easier to be a peacemaker than it is to be a troublemaker. It's not what normally happens, but it is what needs to be happen. I was telling my boys just today, one person at a time. One of my sons said, it won't make a difference. I said, I can try. I said, you don't know that. I said, what are we going to do? Just going to sit back and just complain? I can try. We can at least try, Vicki. We can try to have a conversation. I'm sure somebody will get angry, but it's okay. We try and we keep trying,
We do. And, you and I are both heavily influenced by our church and our pastor in the diverse church that we're a part of. It can't be easy. I mean, he makes it look easy, but it always costs you when you are a bridge builder. Yeah, you say making peace is easier, but, sometimes people can sit there and bellyache, and that seems to be what people want to do, is they just want to sit there and talk about the person over there. Mm-hmm. But, the easiest way, who was it who said the easiest way to get rid of your enemies is to make them your friends? And I think that when you befriend people and you increase your circle of friends and the people you love and the people you see, and you love people for who they are and their beautiful differences, the enemies, you just don't find them anymore because you love people.
And it's what you focus on. What is your perception? Everybody has to make a conscious decision to be a better person. What type of person are you going to be? I'm sure we've heard, in the morning, today is a new day. What are you going to do with it? You have to decide. I am going to promote peace. I am going to love everyone. I am going to be a peacemaker. As much as lies within me, I am going to do what I can. And sometimes that means that I may have to walk away. I don't have to win the argument. It has nothing to do with me being Black and you being white, or me being African American, or you being Caucasian. It is just that at some point, somebody has to choose to be the bigger person. And then you won't always win the argument, but you can just walk away. A lot of things would be different if people just walked away sometimes. If you can't agree and it's escalating, it's okay to walk away.
Now, I have to speak from my own perspective here, which is being a woman in the South, but being a woman who's in IT, a geek woman,
yeah.
Which my previous school, but we had a vendor that was going to be on site and need to use the network, and they were going to have a VPN and they needed a tunnel, which my geeky friends will know what that is, and needed some information. Well, they called the school and they said, can I meet your IT director? They said, we'll have the person up there. Well, they called me and I go up there and The man looks at me up and down, looks me up and down, feet to head to feet to head, right? And says, little lady, will you take me to your IT director? I need to do a few things on your network that would be difficult for you to understand. And of course, the people at the front office are looking at it because they know I'm a little bit geeky, right? I'm known to that. And I just looked at him and I said, sure, I'll take you to the IT director. Follow me. So we walked into my classroom and I said, you can sit right there. The IT director will be right here. Right across from my desk, right? And then I walk around my desk and I sat down and I said, okay, how can I help you? You're the IT director? Yes. And then, it was talking down to me. Well, I need to do something called a VP. I said, yeah, okay, what do you need? Do you need the IP? What do you need, right? It took about 4 or 5 minutes, but he understood that he could talk like a normal geek and I could understand. I had a professor, Dr. Adler, who's my favorite professor from college. And he always said, if you're incredibly competent, that's one of the greatest ways to deal with the isms in the world because people can't afford to discriminate against you if you're world class. Because back in the day, there weren't many minorities at Georgia Tech and there weren't many women at Georgia Tech. So we were all, outnumbered. But people are people and people mess up and people have biases. And some people are just obnoxious jerks. I mean, they just are. But it doesn't mean that we have to let our world devolve into a place where everybody's ugly to each other. It just doesn't.
Right. You recognize the problem and you work to de-escalate the situation because that could have really gotten kind of out of hand. And, that's what we got to learn how to do.
Yep. I appreciate my friend, Dr. Andrea Dozier, coming on the show and talking and sharing. Andrea, I appreciate your thoughts.
You're welcome.
And I appreciate my beautiful, awesome listeners. I also appreciate the fact that there's a lot of you out there that do choose to listen to the show, and it is a choice. And some of you may choose to never listen to me again. But you know what? It's about having the conversations that need to be had. And right now, we need to understand there's a lot of hurt in the world, and we need to understand that none of us knows everything. Right. We need to understand we all have bias. We all have things we don't know. There's a lot of things about Andrea's life I don't know and I don't understand. Now I always do hug and kiss my children because I always say, I never know if I'll see you again. But I think that the reasons you say it are probably different than the reasons I say it. And that breaks my heart. And if we can have some human empathy and love for one another and step back a minute from our heated political situation, which I don't know if that's possible, but I do think it's always possible to see the human sitting across the table.
Right.
You have any thoughts as we finish?
No, it's okay to see the human across the table and recognize that they're different. But hey, I can learn from them. It's okay that they're different. I can learn from them. How can I help them? How can they help me? And I just think that we are so much more than our differences. And if we can just remember that, I think that will help us in our day-to-day living. Everybody just needs to take a step back and say, hey, that's a person. That person adds some type of value. That person means something to someone. And I need to respect that. And I think that's what's missing, Vicki.
And how can we have more conversations and understand? Because, I'm a big one for having conversations. But if your conversations don't change you and if you don't start seeing the world differently as a result of those conversations, then it's just wasted words.
Right. I think you said this or somebody said this. You don't know what you don't know until you realize that you don't know what you don't know. Does that
Yeah, I think you and I did. We don't know what we don't know. That's the struggle with technology. People don't want to learn something new in technology because they think they know it all and they don't know what they don't know. I think that ignorance of our ignorance is probably more dangerous than acknowledged ignorance. I'm admitting that I don't understand what it's like to be Andrea Dozier.
But it's hard to be Vicki Davis. It's hard for each individual to be who they are. But, as an individual, as a mom, I have purposed in my heart that I am not going to allow a lot of negativity and division in my heart. There's just so much more to me as a person, to me as a mom. I have so much more to give, and I think everyone does. It is a purposeful effort that everyone needs to put forth. Everyone needs to do their part. What can I do to help with the issues that are dividing us? Sometimes it's just listening. I don't understand why this is offensive to this person, okay? It's all right for you not to understand it, but are you willing to listen to me explain to you what is offensive about it so that you can make a decision? And then if I explain it to you, I need to be okay with you still not understanding it. As long as you have the information, then you can decide.
Well, and I think the hard thing for me is I want somebody to tell me if I've offended them. It's nothing like being blindsided by your own ignorance. And then there are people who say, well, you should have just known. Well, was I born knowing how to multiply these numbers? I mean, somebody had to teach me. And I think that we've been so lacking in our ability to have these conversations, brave conversations about what you feel like raising your 3 boys. And honestly, and maybe this is just the South, but I think it's our world. There's a lot of things you just don't talk about. As a woman geek, I've always tried not to wear that to the table when I knew I was being talked down to. You know when you're being talked down to. I mean, don't you? You know when people are patronizing you or when they're saying, little lady, this is what a Wi-Fi. And you've had it where people patronize you, right?
Yeah, or sweetie.
Which some of that's just both being women.
But you can tell that there's a difference. It's just like, I wasn't expecting you to call me that or refer to me as that. But okay, let's back up.
Well, and I don't want to end this on a negative note because certainly we've talked about a lot of hard issues and a lot of things that aren't fair and that'll make people mad, obviously. For somebody to assume that your child had no internet because they didn't do their homework, you're like, that's just so beyond. But as you listen to this, educators, I hope I'm reflecting on this conversation, that the ability to be honest and truthful and trusting and work together. And you can't walk across a bridge you've burned. You can't. And, I had some people in my life at one point who got angry at me. And as I prayed over it, because I do, and Andrew's a prayer too, I'm like, you know what? As fast as they light a match to that bridge, I'm going to pour water on it. And for a while, I'm going to have to just forgive, so that maybe when we get through this situation, we'll still have a bridge left so that we can run across the bridge and embrace. And yeah, that sounds like ridiculously romantic, but I've just got to believe that loving one another and this country has come too far from where we've been, and we have too far to go than to destroy ourselves because of things. It's just, yes, we have a lot of reform that needs to happen. But progress doesn't happen when people are standing around a table screaming at each other. And it definitely doesn't happen when people are throwing Molotov cocktails at each other. Right. So you don't build bridges and burn them down at the same time. It just doesn't happen.
If you burn the bridge down, let's build another one.
Well, I think that's what some of us are going to have to do.
And reform starts with conversation.
It does. And it also starts with saying, you know what, enough. Yeah. Enough. Whatever it takes for your children to feel safe driving to school and back. I mean, we need our police. I know so many great police officers. There's so many amazing people in our military. You've got one in the military. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're amazing people that serve and love, and they're amazing teachers. And sometimes people say, oh, all teachers are bad. No, all teachers aren't bad. You and I are both teachers, so we're not going to say that. But all that said is we've seen something that needs to change. And then we need to do what it takes to move it forward and to make progress and stop making excuses.
Right. And it's possible, Vicki, I know that we are so much better, and I believe that we can achieve more togetherness.
Well, listeners, we've given you a lot more than 10. Thanks, Andrea.
You're welcome. Have a good day, Vicki.
If you enjoyed today's 10-Minute Teacher podcast, why not subscribe on iTunes? You can also catch up with Vicki on Twitter at CoolCatTeacher or level up and learn with her blogs and free resources at CoolCatTeacher.com. Thanks for listening.